Hello, welcome to Microfiche Microphone. I'm Micah, and on this channel, we look at microfiche from the past, old newspaper articles in the public domain. We look at them with our modern eyes, our modern perspective, and see what we can learn from them. On this microfiche time capsule, we are looking back at the Juvenile Instructor from August 1st, 1896. And this article is entitled, Topics of the Times, Death of Apostle Abraham H. Cannon. So, Abraham H. Cannon, I do happen to know quite a bit about. As I have mentioned in previous videos, I did write an article on this man as well. He was quite interesting, I found. He was called at quite a young age, and I believe, oh gosh, how old was he? He was 30. Sorry, I thought he was like 28. No, he was 30. But before he was in the Quorum of the 12, he was in the presidency of the 70 for like 5 years, at like age 25. Yeah, he served a mission or two. He was also a polygamist, and one of the things that and he died very young. So one of the things that happened was, if I remember correctly, he left the country in order to marry one of his plural wives. I don't remember which one. And they got married at sea. And because they were outside of the United States, they felt like that was kind of a loophole in order to allow him to marry post-manifesto. That a lot of people did this. Okay, this was actually relatively common at the time. People would either go to Mexico or go to sea. And if they were outside of the country far enough, then they weren't inside the U.S. and therefore they felt justified in getting married. So, for like the fourth time. I don't know how many he had, but I think he was four. Four sounds right. Ish. I could be wrong. Anyways, but he came back with an ear infection that became a raging ear infection, and pre-antibiotics, that's what killed him. Can you imagine being killed by an ear infection? Like, that sounds horrifically painful. So, and he died at like 35 or something like that in 1896. He might have been slightly older, but yeah, like, he was a young man. Nobody saw it coming. And by the way, his like last wife that he married did get pregnant, like in that, like, I think it was 3 or 4 weeks before he passed. And she had a baby, little girl, that she named Marba, because that's Abram spelled backwards. So, Marba Cannon, yeah. Who actually ended up becoming kind of an important person in her own right, yeah. Anyways, those are just a few little things that I know off the top of my head. I do also know that he wrote a series of articles on one of his missions, which you can totally tell when it changes from being a, wow, I'm in a culture I don't know, this is really interesting, to let's try and make this a spiritual experience. So, because it starts out as basically a travelogue, and it eventually turns into, maybe I'm here to be doing some work, It's interesting to watch that transition. So I think that a lot of missionaries who served foreign missions can relate to that experience. Anyway, so let's take a look at the article. And I chose this one because it is one of the longer ones on him. There weren't that many to choose from, to be fair. But also this one mentions his death, which not all of them did, so... Anyway, topics of the times, death of Apostle Abraham H. Cannon. With a feeling neither tongue nor pen can express, we announce to our readers and make record in these columns of the death of Abraham Hoagland Cannon. His sickness in the acute form which confined him to his bed was of scarcely 2 weeks' duration. He was out for the last time on Sunday the 5th of July. With the breaking of the dawn on Sunday the 19th, his noble spirit obtained release from its tired casket of mortality and went back to the Father who gave it. No mature reader or patron of the Juvenile Instructor needs from us either introduction to or words of praise for the departed one. There is scarcely even a child in Zion who has not learned to love and know him. His life, though so short, has for years been spent with and before the people, old and young. It was an open book, to be read and admired of all people for its purity, energy, and absolute honesty. Thoroughly businesslike in all his methods, he was nevertheless charitable and forbearing, with scrupulous exactness in all his affairs. He was not less generous than just. His heart was sound, his hand ever ready to aid, his mind filled with high thoughts and aspirations for the benefit of mankind. Himself a type of rare obedience as a son from childhood up, and as a servant of the Lord during all his young manhood. He was peculiarly qualified to teach this great lesson to the youth of Israel, by word of mouth and by his writings, filled with the knowledge of the gospel and inspired by the light which accompanies it. He knew whereof he spoke when dwelling upon the beauties of revealed religion and the great blessings which follow the sincere believer. He was not only a teacher of the true word, but a doer of it also. Possessed of singular openness of character and of extraordinary industry, he had nothing but contempt for a hypocrite and no sympathy whatever with a sluggard. Yet to men's feelings was he ever kind, and that exalted charity which is so sweet an attribute of divinity never had a truer human exemplar than he. Peaceful, yet courageous, quiet, yet unswerving of purpose, humble among his brethren, yet valiant under every condition for the testimony of Jesus and in the defense of right. He was, all in all, a man, and we shall not soon look upon his like again. See, and I don't, sometimes it annoys me when they get, flowery and stuff, but in this case I think it's appropriate, especially since this article came out right after his death. A lot of people would still be mourning and would be quite upset, by the fact that he died at age, 36, So I don't think that this is, inappropriate. I think that for the occasion, that this is fine. Abraham H. Cannon, the son of George Q. Cannon. I didn't mention that, but he was George Q. Cannon's son. He was not the eldest, but he was one of them. And Elizabeth Hoagland Cannon, and that's why his middle name was Hoagland, was born in this city, so Salt Lake City, March 12th, 1859. His father was absent from home on a mission at the time, and the babe received the name of his grandfather, the late Bishop Abraham Hoagland. And he was relatively well known in his own right. He in the early church, like Brigham Young's time, they mentioned Abraham Hoagland. I believe he was a bishop. The late Bishop Abraham Hoagland. He was baptized when 8 years of age, and soon afterwards began that willing faithfulness in the ministry which always characterized him by performing the duties of a deacon in the 14th Ward. He was a regular attendant at Sunday school and truly loved to go. Indeed, he was essentially and inherently a good boy, a model of truthfulness and obedience. In due time, when he was 20 years of age, he was called upon a mission, and responded with readiness. His first field of labor was in England. Subsequently, he went to the Swiss and German mission, I was pretty sure, where he mastered the language so thoroughly as to be able to write some of the hymns which the German saints still sing in their assemblages. I wasn't aware of that, I didn't remember that, but, I wonder which ones he wrote, I'll have to look that up. His knowledge of music also assisted him in the arrangement of a songbook specially prepared for use in that mission, and the president insisted that his name should be perpetuated on the title page as one of the publishers. After an absence of about 2 years and a half, he returned home, and in the fall of 1882 he was chosen one of the first 7 presidents of the 70s. It was right after his mission. It was and I think you should be president in the presidency of the 70. He's wait, what? He zealously performed the duties of that high office until the autumn of 1889, when he was called and ordained to the apostleship, being then and up to the time of his death the junior member of the quorum. During the crusade, I don't know why they put that in quotes, and I'm not sure what they're referring to, he served a term in the penitentiary for conscience sake. Okay, during the time when the saints were persecuted for polygamy, But like I said, he was one of them. So, being sentenced to a fine and 6 months' imprisonment for what the law termed unlawful cohabitation. It was during this trying ordeal that he became so intimately associated and acquainted with President Lorenzo Snow, a friendship feelingly referred to by the latter in his remarks at the funeral. Yeah, so he became friends with Lorenzo Snow. He wasn't the only one. Rutger Clausen also became friends with Lorenzo Snow during that time. Lorenzo Snow was in there for a while. I think he was in the prison for like a year, something like that. It is not necessary to dwell upon the labors of the deceased in the apostleship, nor to mention in detail the many positions of honor and trust he occupied in the business world in this city and state. His connection with this journal, however, deserves more than a passing allusion. Immediately upon his return from his mission, he entered this office as manager of the entire business and assistant editor of the Juvenile Instructor. He did not consider himself a fluent or ready writer, yet some of the best work that has been done on the paper during the last 12 or 14 years has been the product of his pen, while the amount that he has contributed is prodigious and quite beyond the calculation of all save those who have been with him all the time. And I'm not sure if he wrote under various pen names or if he just had one. I do know one of his pen names, but I can't remember at the moment. It's in my other article. But, if he really wrote that much, I'm guessing that he either didn't sign a lot of them or that he had more than one pen name. That's just my guess, because there wasn't that much under that one pen name. I mean, there was some. There was a good handful of articles, but I wouldn't say, prodigious, like they're describing here. What he has done for other periodicals would, if known, cause him to be regarded as one of the most industrious and prolific writers in the community. And when to all this is added his personal management of the papers in question, and the aid rendered in the management of numerous other enterprises of magnitude, it hardly need be said that great as was his capacity for work, it has been taxed to the uttermost. The service he has rendered this paper has not been fully appreciated, perhaps, but it can never be forgotten. Well, they just said that it was appreciated, so, it was appreciated because they just said it was, you're expressing your gratitude to somebody, then it was appreciated, you know what I mean? I don't know. He was so completely identified with the establishment that in his loss it seems as if the greater and better part had gone. Whoever wrote this article, the editor, clearly admired him as a lot, It is hard to believe that his place can ever be filled. Surely he will be missed, not only in the walks of life where he was daily seen, but by the thousands over whom his talents and influence and his example were exercised for good. But the Lord giveth, and the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Abraham H. Cannon has earned his rest and his reward, and he has gone to their enjoyment. He leaves an untarnished name, a spotless record, a priceless heritage to his family, his loved ones, and the youth of Zion. Mourning him as a loved one gone before, cut down in the very vigor of his manhood, and when the future seemed so full of glorious promise for him, we who remain can but hope and strive for a blissful reunion with him in eternity. May his pure life and love sanctify all our endeavors in the continued battle of life. May that tired body of his have sweet, peaceful rest. The editor. I think that's lovely. It's really a lovely tribute to somebody who recently passed. Let me look up to see who the editor was, because I'm sure it says somewhere in here. See if I can find it. George Q. Cannon, editor. Yeah. I suspected it might have been, because George Q. Cannon was associated with this paper for a long time. So this was written by his father. I can't even imagine having to write a eulogy for your own child. Yeah. That's just awful. And, how much he admired him and how he feels that loss. I feel like that's very well expressed in this tribute to him. So, it's really, really tragic. But I feel like it's very lovely of his father to have sat down and written down a tribute to his own son, who had recently passed away. I don't know if I would be in an emotional place to be able to do something like that if I were in that position. Anyway, let's take a look at my article that I wrote, and I'll put all of the sources that I used down in the description box below if you would like to look them up. So, first of all, I like to include a scripture, and the one I chose for him was Proverbs 12:27. The substance of a diligent man is precious. Yeah? Yeah, I just felt like that was a good descriptor of him. Abraham H. Cannon. So, ordained 7 October 1889 at age 30 by Wilford Woodruff. Biography. Abraham Hoagland Cannon was born 12 March 1859 in Salt Lake City to George Q. Cannon and Elizabeth Hoagland. Abraham was named after his maternal grandfather, Abraham Hoagland, who was his father's bishop in winter quarters. Yeah, so cool. When Abraham was only a year old, his father was called as one of the Council of the 12 Apostles. So he saw that whole process, you know. Abraham was baptized on his 8th birthday, 12 March 1867, by his father, and was ordained an elder 7 July 1875 at age 16, also by his father. He received a good education, graduating from Deseret University, but chose to learn the practical vocation of carpentry. Nights, he studied architecture, because of course he did. He was very diligent, yeah, I mentioned that. While his father was editor of the Deseret News, Abraham worked there for a time as well as an errand boy. He married his first wife, Sarah Ann Jenkins, in October 1878. A year later, he married his cousin, Wilhelmina Mina Cannon. Shortly after finishing his studies, in 1879, Abraham was called on a mission to Europe. He served primarily in Germany and Switzerland, although he began his mission in England. He mastered the language while there and wrote several hymns, later helping to translate the Book of Mormon into German. His mother also passed away during his absence. I believe he wrote about that. He was a little sad that he wasn't there. You know, that's what he was most sad about. While on his mission, he wrote a series of articles called Jottings by a Young Missionary, which were published under the pseudonym Streben, German for striving, in the Juvenile Instructor. Yeah. They were published between June of 1880 and the end of December 1882. The articles read like a travelogue, describing the history and tourist attractions of the cities he visited, with a few missionary experiences related in between. Yeah, but I feel like they got more and more as he went on. The laws in Germany and Switzerland at the time were such that the authorities often kept the saints from meeting together, objecting to the doctrines of polygamy and encouraging the converts to emigrate to Utah. The missionaries of the day suffered a lot of persecution, and several were sent to prison, although Abraham Cannon was spared this experience. The following are excerpts from his articles describing some of his experiences. My feelings on learning that I was appointed to perform a mission in Europe were very peculiar, and can be better imagined than described. Having been born in Utah and never having been outside of its boundaries, I felt my inexperience, and how unprepared I was to enter into such a labor. Yet God is with those who do their uttermost, and will bless those who will seek his assistance. With this knowledge I prepared to go forth, feeling thankful for the great honor conferred upon me, and also feeling the responsibility of the position, as a messenger of life and salvation. Schreiben, Jottings by a Young Missionary, 1880, page 130. My appointment was for the Nottingham Conference, and on Saturday evening I arrived in the city of Nottingham, and was rather disappointed in finding that the president of the conference had gone out in the district to remain several days. There was no alternative for me but to remain here until his return. The next day being Sunday, I of course attended meeting. The afternoon was spent in bearing testimony, and in the evening I made my first attempt in speaking as a missionary. I trembled from head to foot, yet feeling determined to bear my testimony, I arose and spoke for a few minutes. Long enough, however, to feel how little I was able to do without the assistance of the God, and to feel that without his Spirit was within me, I could not successfully proclaim his word. Humility, thankfulness, and prayerfulness are very essential elements for everyone to possess who would be a successful advocate of the gospel. Streben, Jottings by a Young Missionary, 1880, page 131. The call came from the president of the mission for me to go to Germany. I cannot tell how I felt when I received this word. Here I was, going to be sent into a country to proclaim the gospel with a language of which I was utterly unacquainted, yet I knew that it was my duty to answer the call, and accordingly trusted in the Lord. Streben, Jottings by a Young Missionary, 1880, page 173. I have tried to give my readers some little idea of the field in which my president called me to remain, to study the language, and as soon as possible to proclaim the gospel. A good branch of the saints was here, and as there was not much traveling to do, I could devote more time to study, and thus my progress would be more rapid. For about 3 weeks after the departure of the president for Switzerland, I was left with no one to whom I could speak English. This, without doubt, was as good a thing as could have happened to me, because I was compelled to learn. But I had to keep myself busy at all times, so as to allow no place for homesickness to enter. And, through the blessings of my Heavenly Father, I was enabled to keep free from this dreadful ailment. I can also testify, as others have before me, that the Book of Mormon gives most excellent reading matter to cause any feelings of lonesomeness to vanish. Streben, Jottings by a Young Missionary, 1880, page 231. The following story he told of meeting a Protestant priest on a train. We argued for some time on the apostasy, restoration of the gospel, and various other subjects, and finally my opposer began to question me as to what church I belonged. "Are you a Baptist?" he asked. I answered no. "An Irrevianer?" "No, I am a Mormon from America." Upon hearing this last reply, my Christian friend held up his hands in holy horror, exclaiming, "Were you a member of any other sect or party on the face of the earth, I would look upon you as a friend and converse with you as a brother. But with a Mormon I will have nothing to do, for a person belonging to such a church is entirely beneath my notice." With this, he gathered his parcels together and moved to another part of the car where he thought himself secure from the attacks of a Mormon from America. A number of passengers listened very attentively to the discussion and were amused to see the discomfiture of the priest when he endeavored to argue against the doctrines of the Scriptures. After the revered gentleman's hasty retreat, a number expressed a desire to hear more of our religion and people, and thus an opportunity was presented of bearing testimony to the truth. Streben, Jottings by a Young Missionary, 1881, page 189. See, that's just it. That's kind of typical missionary experiences. I was appointed to labor in the North German Conference, which had not been visited by an elder from Zion for a considerable length of time, owing to the fact that the laws of Germany forbid our brethren to meet and converse with the saints in the capacity of a religious service. Although I was happy to have the privilege of laboring in the ministry, still I felt my great weakness in being sent out alone among strangers. The Lord, however, gave me strength to overcome my natural feelings and taught me to place implicit confidence in Him, so that when the day of my departure from my new field of labor arrived, I hailed the same with pleasure and entered upon the performance of my duties with a joyful heart. Streben, Jottings by a Young Missionary, 1882, page 101. In order to do good without acting unwisely, we deemed it best to discontinue our open meetings, to divide the branch into several districts, and to meet on evenings during the week at the homes of the saints, inviting only such persons to our assemblies who as earnestly seeking after truth. I think that's a typo, who were earnestly seeking after truth, I think is what they mean. This plan proved successful, for we not only enjoyed a rich portion of the good spirit ourselves, but we also had the pleasure of seeing the branch rapidly increase in numbers, and we could easily see that the Lord had overruled the wicked designs of the adversary for the good of his work. Streben, Jottings by a Young Missionary, 1882, page 101 to 102. On arriving in Bremen, I received a letter from the President of the European Mission containing my honorable release to return home with the company then about to sail. With great joy I packed my valise, boarded the ship, and bade Germany farewell, turning my face to the land of the free. Still sorrowful thoughts crowded themselves upon me in parting with my brother, and in leaving behind me the poverty-stricken saints, whom I had learned to love because of their faithfulness and sincerity in the cause of truth. Yet in leaving them I felt that they were in the hands of God, who would bless them according to their righteous desires, and would also gather them in his own due time. Streben, Jottings by a Young Missionary, 1882, page 375. When he says leave his brother, he means his brother. He had a brother, I believe David was his name, who was also in the same mission. And so they were literally serving together for a while. Yeah, so he means his actual brother. My feelings on arriving home once more and meeting with my friends and relatives in the homes of the saints can be better imagined than described. I have been away from home 2 years, 7½ months, during which time my changes, some sad ones, had occurred. Yet on returning, my heart was filled with gratitude to God that he had given me a home among his people, and had permitted me to go abroad and bear my humble testimony to the nations. Streben, Jottings by a Young Missionary, 1882, page 375. Following his mission, on 10 June 1882, at the age of 23, he was called to the presidency of the 70. Can you imagine? He also assumed control of the Juvenile Instructor, a periodical geared toward children founded by his father. He was able to develop what was a small printing office into one of the foremost publishing houses in the West. In the winter of 1883 to 84, Abraham was stricken with typhoid fever and was near death for several weeks. He experienced what he described as an out-of-body incident, where he saw his deceased mother, an experience he treasured the rest of his life. A year later, on 28 April 1885, Abraham H. Cannon was arrested on the charge of unlawful cohabitation. He pled guilty and was then sentenced to 6 months' imprisonment and was forced to pay a $300 fine, the maximum penalty at the time. During his incarceration, Abraham wrote a great deal, keeping a detailed record of his experiences and doing some writing and editing of a more general nature. He was called as a member of the Quorum of the 12 in October 1889, together with Mariner W. Merrill and Anton H. Lund. Yeah. There's another example of multiple people being called into the Quorum of the 12 at the same time. That happened a good handful of times. So, when it happened a few years ago with 3 being called at once, people made a big deal about it and be like, oh, it's never happened before. It has. It absolutely has. There's another example. We talked about this before with Charles C. Rich, where he was called at the same time as 3 other people. And Abraham H. Cannon was called at the same time as 2 other people. And, it happens. So, having a father in the first presidency wasn't the reason for his calling. On the occasion of his call to the apostleship, Abraham recorded in his journal, "Early this morning, I took father to the hot springs in my buggy. Our conversation on the road gave me very great joy to see how happy he was at my call to the apostleship without any suggestion from him." Britton, 1999, Chapter 8, These Clouds Will Roll By, once more to public usefulness, location 9155. It was the Kindle version I read. That was the book was the biography of George Q. Cannon. Yeah. Around the time of his call to the apostleship, Abraham married Mary Mamie E. Croxall. As a concession to the manifesto and the desires of the general population of the church, Elder Cannon built 3 homes for his 3 wives on the same plot of land. Yeah? They required them to have their own homes. So, in order to try and, conform to the laws, they built each one their own house. Yeah? Not everybody did it, but some people tried. Together with his brother, John Q. Cannon, he took charge of the Deseret News in 1892. Abraham was responsible for the business management of the successful newspaper. He also became the proprietor of the Contributor, a magazine for the youth of the church. So he was very active with the periodicals, yeah? One of Elder Cannon's most striking characteristics was his determination to keep careful notes. He was often called upon to take the minutes in various meetings of the Presidency of the 70 and later the Quorum of the 12. His extensive and detailed diaries of this time as an apostle have also been published and offer an invaluable look into the lives of the apostles at the end of the 19th century. And I can echo that. I know I wrote this, but I can echo that. It's absolutely amazing what's in there. It's so detailed, and so you can find out about lots of people just by reading Abraham H. Cannon's diary. It's really, it's journal, but yeah, it's really, really interesting. So if you are interested, go ahead and take a look at that. It's fascinating. He had great business abilities. He served as business manager of the Deseret News Publishing Company, vice president of George Q. Cannon and Sons Co., vice president and assistant manager of the Bullion, Beck, and Champion Mining Company, and director of several banks and railroads. Elder Cannon was also vice president of the Salt Lake City Chamber of Commerce, and was in line to become its president. Remember that he died very young, so... Elder Cannon spent a great deal of time looking after his father's business interests and worried whether he was pleasing his father. He was often in demand because of his accounting experience, investment sense, and management skills. Despite his father's deep investment in Republican politics, he remained neutral in most political situations. Shortly before his death and Utah's successful bid for statehood, he was chastised by Joseph F. Smith for remaining so neutral in politics. He's like, nope, I'm staying out of it. No, I'm staying out of it. Yeah. You have to admire that. In October 1892, Elder Cannon's younger brother, David Hoagland Cannon, died unexpectedly while serving his mission in Germany, where Abraham had also served a few years earlier. Elder Cannon had assisted in the missionary preparation preceding his brother's mission, and therefore undoubtedly tried to prepare him to serve in the then hostile environment of Germany. Despite advice to the contrary and his own ignorance of the language and culture, David Cannon had decided to serve without purse or scrip. He only served 5 months when he died from exposure. He was delirious when his brother, Hugh J. Cannon, who was serving his mission in a neighboring city, reached him to discover that David hadn't eaten in 4 days. Abraham Cannon was stunned upon hearing the news of his brother's death, as the family had no inkling of him suffering. Elder Cannon felt guilty about it and named his next-born son after him. He felt bad also because it was partly his job to send him money. And he was like, hey, I'm going to send you some money. And then David was like, no, I'm going without purse or scrip. Don't send me money. And he's like, no, you need money. You need money to support yourself. You have to support yourself in this mission. It's too dangerous to try and ask people for stuff. You're not going to get it, yeah? And he's like, no, I'm good. So, I don't feel like Abraham H. Cannon did anything wrong in this case. It's very unfortunate that David Cannon had such a determination. Also, I do apologize for mixing up David Cannon with clearly one of his other brothers, who he had actually served with, so... Because George Q. Cannon had a very large family. It's not like he was lacking in brothers. Alright. Shortly after his brother's untimely death, Elder Cannon became involved in a situation that appears very strange to the reader of today. His brother, David, had been engaged to Lillian Hamlin, and had declared a long-standing intention to marry his cousin Anne Mousley Cannon, who had died when he died unexpectedly. George Q. Cannon then went to his son Abraham and asked him to marry Anne for time, while they would seal her to his deceased son David. Any posterity would then be assigned to David's line in the next life. He said that President Woodruff would agree to this sort of polygamous marriage post-manifesto if it took place in Mexico. Abraham agreed, although he very rarely mentioned the situation in his extensive journals, and he hardly acknowledged that this even happened. Anne's father also agreed, provided his daughter was okay with the arrangement, and the two were presumed to have married in Mexico in 1892, although Anne never bore any children. Alright? Very strange, but that is what happened. I'm not judging this in any sense, in any direction. I don't really have strong feelings about this, except to say that it's very strange to us today to read about these kind of situations. But at the time, it was a thing that sometimes occurred. Alright? Then, shortly before his own untimely death, he tried to rescue the failing Utah Loan and Trust Company, an Ogden bank going deeply into debt to buy it. Around the same time, Abraham married Lillian Hamlin, also in his brother David's stead, presumably on a boat off the coast of California in 1896. Although Joseph F. Smith denied having performed the marriage, there is some indication that he was involved in some way, perhaps performing her sealing to David. During this trip, Elder Cannon got ocean water in his ear, which may have contributed to his death. 9 months after the trip, Lillian bore a daughter, Marba, which is Abram, spelled backwards. Abraham H. Cannon died 19 July 1896 at age 37 after a brief and intensely painful ear infection, possibly related to his bout of typhoid fever. While on his deathbed, he asked his brother to read proofs of the contributor aloud so he could approve them, and there would be no delay in publication. This is how hard a worker he was. He's like, no, I'm basically dying, and this is horrifically painful. You know what? Read those aloud to me. I can't focus enough to read them myself. Okay, yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, send him off for publication. Ugh. Abraham had been a great support to his father, who said on the occasion of his death, I could scarcely refrain from weeping and thinking about the manner in which he has helped me on various occasions and done what he could for my sons, some of whom seemed inclined to lay heavy burdens upon me, without any design on their part to do so, but through mismanagement. Abraham has always stood by me, and done all in his power to assist me, and I felt to bless him for it. Britton, 1999, Chapter 12, From Statehood to the Century's End, Abraham's Death. location 12480. So, George Q. Cannon felt very close to his son Abraham and left provisions for his children in his will. Yeah, I'm going to skip the quotes. There's a lot of them. If you are interested, go ahead and take a look. I will read the very, very last of them. Yeah? Alright. Actually, okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to read, like, the last handful of quotes, and these are not by him directly, these are about him. So, first one is by Francis M. Lyman. Francis M. Lyman thought that he worked too hard. He even went so far as to say that he died of overwork. His excessive work came from the goodness and generosity of his soul. His nature was such that he could not refuse any good thing that was possible for him to do. Lyman, 2010, Introduction. Joseph S. Smith gave this glowing tribute at his funeral. Never did I see Abraham attempt to use an influence by force or by contention or by argument or in any way other than by the calm, peaceful, kindly statement of the truth as it welled up in his soul and as it beamed from him like rays of intelligence. In the spirit of kindness or reason or persuasion and of love he sought to mold the thoughts of others and prevailed upon them to see the truth as he saw it. He was a person of pure intelligence and judgment and wisdom, with which he was endowed to a marvelous extent for a man of his years. A man of truth, a man fearless when duty called him, a man who is not afraid to meet the consequence of his own acts, a man among men, as well as a man of God, and in every way good and true, so far as my knowledge goes. Lyman, 2010, Introduction. The following tribute was also given of him. In his religious life and duties, Abraham H. Cannon was scrupulously strict and energetic. He did not shrink from any duty devolving upon him and avoided no obligation, but responded to every call with promptness and fidelity. His precision in this regard was remarkable, and was characteristic of him from his youth up. As a boy and as a man, he was frank and fearless, with a love of truth and virtue that was sublime. He never sought to shift to others any burden that devolved upon him, and never hesitated to undertake a task that fell to his lot. In his public religious calling and in his private life he was a true disciple of Christ, essentially a servant of God, whose conduct endeared him to all associates by the bonds of conformity to divine religion, to divine principles. When, in the course of events during the persecutions of the saints, it came his turn to endure imprisonment for his religion, he did so cheerfully, praising God that he was worthy to suffer in his cause. And all sufferings and privations, then and at other times in his ministry, he bore without murmuring, being willing to endure all for the gospel's sake. In his record as a man of God, he will ever live in the hearts of the Latter-day Saints, by whom he was greatly beloved. Jenson, Latter-day Saint Biographical Encyclopedia, 1901, page 168. So here's my conclusion. What kind of man was Abraham H. Cannon? He was a diligent man. He never stopped working for what he had. He tried to do what he felt was right at all times. He was an excellent writer and shared his talents by writing articles for the church. He had implicit faith in the leadership of his father and sought his approval at all times. He had a great love for his family and was deeply affected by the sudden death of his brother David. He also put his affection into action, acting in his family's behalf whenever possible. I don't even feel like there's much that needed to be added there, because honestly, Abraham H. Cannon was amazing. He was amazing. Of all people, to emulate, I feel like he would be one of the top ones. Go ahead, put him way up there. And I wouldn't even say this about all former presidents of the church, but in this case, absolutely. Abraham H. Cannon, diligent, hardworking, willing to use his talents for the good of other people and for the good of the church in general. And just really, I feel like that's something that everybody should strive to be. Everybody should strive to do, is to be this kind of a person. Diligent, hardworking, willing to share with others of their talents. And I think that that's probably one of the main characteristics of him. I feel bad for him that he felt so guilty about his brother's death, though. It was clear to me that his brother was the one who was responsible for his own death. I don't want to make light of it, but like, honestly, that was dumb. That was a silly thing to do. You were told by an expert not to go on this mission at this particular place at this particular time without purse or script. That's just not going to happen. It's not a good idea. And you didn't listen to anybody, thinking that that's a sign of faith. But like, there's a thin line between faith and just stupidity. Like, why are you doing this? That's dumb, yeah? And that's what I think of that, because you were told by an expert not to do this and you did it anyway. So he was responsible for his own death. So the expert, Abraham, should not have felt guilty for the death of the person who was too stubborn to listen, yeah? And I'm sorry that he was plagued by that at the end of his life. Otherwise, I don't feel like he would have married 2 women in his brother's stead. Yeah? And it's just my opinion. Anyway, what do you think? Leave your comments down below. You don't have to agree with me, but that is my opinion on the subject. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video today, as much as I did, at least. And if you did, please give the video a like and subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see you in the next video.